The gavel struck the desk with a resounding crack, echoing through the boardroom like a thunderclap. Victoria sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, her fingers still resting lightly on the smooth wood of the gavel. The faces around her blurred into a sea of shock and disbelief. Family members, longtime employees, and trusted advisors who had gathered for what they thought would be a routine quarterly meeting. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat resonating with the weight of the moment she'd been preparing for since childhood. Effective immediately, her voice cut through the room with precision, "I am relieving Margaret of her position as Chief Operations Officer." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications that rippled through the assembled crowd. Margaret, her own sister, sat frozen in her seat 2 chairs down, her perfectly manicured hands suddenly gripping the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Victoria watched as the color drained from Margaret's face, her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack under the unexpected blow. For years, they had played their roles in the family business, Victoria as the strategic thinker, always analyzing and planning for the future, while Margaret had been the charming face of operations, dazzling clients and partners with her social graces. But beneath the surface of their professional relationship lay years of tension, subtle power plays, and whispered arguments about the direction of their company. Victoria had spent countless nights reviewing financial reports, identifying inefficiencies, and developing plans to modernize their operations, only to have her suggestions dismissed or watered down by Margaret's resistance to change. The decision to fire her sister hadn't come easily. It was born from months of careful consideration, sleepless nights, and numerous attempts to work collaboratively. Each failed attempt at partnership had chipped away at Victoria's patience until she realized that the company's survival depended on decisive action. As the newly appointed CEO, taking over from their retiring father, she knew this moment would define her leadership and determine whether their family legacy would thrive or crumble. Margaret finally found her voice, though it trembled with barely contained fury. "You can't do this," she spat, pushing back her chair with such force that it toppled over behind her. "After everything I've done for this company? After all these years?" Her eyes darted around the room, seeking allies among the stunned faces, but finding only uncomfortable silence. Victoria met her sister's gaze steadily, though her stomach churned with the weight of what she had just set in motion. "This isn't personal," Victoria began, though they both knew it was anything but. "It's about making decisions that are best for the future of our company." She reached for the folder containing months' worth of documented evidence, mismanaged projects, declining profit margins, and missed opportunities that could be directly attributed to Margaret's leadership. Before she could open it, Margaret interrupted with a bitter laugh that sent shivers down Victoria's spine. "You think you're better than me?" Margaret's voice rose, bouncing off the walls of the boardroom. "You think your fancy degrees and your theoretical strategies make you qualified to run this company?" She took a step forward, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "Let's see how long you last without me holding everything together." The tension in the room became palpable as other family members exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded in agreement with Margaret's assessment, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unwilling to take sides in what was rapidly becoming a public spectacle. Victoria felt the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on her shoulders, but she refused to back down. This moment wasn't just about removing her sister from her position, it was about proving to everyone, including herself, that she had what it took to lead their family business into a new era. As Margaret gathered her belongings, her movements sharp and deliberate, Victoria couldn't help but notice the calculating look in her sister's eyes. There was something more behind that glare, something that hinted at a deeper game being played. The boardroom, once filled with warmth and camaraderie, now felt like a battlefield where the first shots of an inevitable war had just been fired. And as Margaret slammed the door behind her, leaving echoes of their confrontation hanging in the air, Victoria knew that this was only the beginning of what promised to be a brutal struggle for control and redemption. The aftermath of Margaret's departure hit Victoria like a tidal wave. Phones rang incessantly in her office as suppliers, clients, and partners sought clarification about the sudden change in leadership. Family members called at all hours, some offering support but many more questioning her judgment. The company grapevine buzzed with speculation, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty that seeped into every department. Victoria found herself working 16-hour days, trying to reassure stakeholders while simultaneously implementing the changes she'd planned for years. Yet with each passing day, she noticed subtle shifts in the company's dynamics that sent warning signals flashing in her mind. Files that should have been readily available disappeared from shared drives. Key employees began calling in sick or resigning without notice. Project timelines that Margaret had always managed seamlessly started unraveling at alarming rates. Victoria discovered that many of the company's most crucial relationships had been maintained through Margaret's personal connections, rather than formal contracts. Suppliers who had worked with them for decades suddenly demanded renegotiated terms or threatened to pull their business entirely. The efficient machine that Margaret had apparently been running was showing its true colors, a Rube Goldberg contraption of favors, informal agreements, and personal loyalties that had collapsed almost instantly without her presence. During one particularly grueling week, Victoria faced 3 major client meetings back-to-back. Each encounter revealed another layer of Margaret's influence that Victoria hadn't anticipated. At the first meeting, a longtime partner surprised her by mentioning a gentleman's agreement that Margaret had assured him would protect their interests. The second client revealed that many of their contracts had automatic termination clauses triggered by leadership changes. By the third meeting, Victoria walked into a room where half the attendees had been replaced by unfamiliar faces, Margaret's contacts who had decided to test the waters with new providers. The financial impact became impossible to ignore. Revenue projections plummeted as key accounts hesitated to renew contracts. The company's credit lines, which had always been reliably extended, suddenly came with stricter terms and higher interest rates. Victoria's attempts to negotiate better deals were met with polite but firm resistance. Margaret's network had effectively closed ranks against her. Even worse, she discovered that several major initiatives she had planned to implement required approvals and sign-offs that Margaret had been deliberately withholding, knowing full well they would expire if not acted upon within specific time frames. Family gatherings became minefields of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled threats. Aunt Eleanor would casually mention how Margaret had always been the social butterfly who kept things running smoothly. Uncle Charles would shake his head and mutter about how some people didn't appreciate what they had until it was gone. Victoria's mother, usually her strongest supporter, began questioning whether she had moved too quickly, suggesting perhaps a trial period or joint leadership might have been wiser. Each comment felt like another brick added to the wall of doubt surrounding her decisions. The media caught wind of the internal turmoil, and soon business publications were running speculative pieces about the family drama at Prescott Enterprises. Headlines questioned Victoria's leadership capabilities, often juxtaposing photos of her serious, focused expressions against Margaret's warm, approachable smiles from past company events. Industry analysts began downgrading their outlook on the company's stock, citing concerns about leadership stability and market confidence. Competitors, sensing blood in the water, intensified their pursuit of Prescott's clients and talent pool. In the midst of this chaos, Victoria received an anonymous package containing years' worth of Margaret's personal correspondence with key industry figures. The letters revealed a complex web of mutual back-scratching arrangements, unofficial partnerships, and implied promises that had kept the company afloat. What shocked Victoria most was how elegantly Margaret had woven these threads, each relationship carefully cultivated and maintained, creating a safety net that Victoria had never suspected existed. The realization dawned on her that firing Margaret hadn't just removed a problematic executive, it had severed the lifeline keeping their entire operation viable. As Victoria pored over financial statements late one night, the magnitude of the situation finally hit home. The company's reserves were lower than she'd anticipated, and cash flow projections showed alarming gaps. Projects she had greenlit based on Margaret's previous assurances about funding were now in jeopardy. Departments she had planned to expand were instead facing budget cuts. The ambitious 5-year plan she had presented to the board during her first week as CEO was rapidly transforming into a desperate scramble for survival. Every phone call, every meeting, every decision seemed to reveal another hidden complication that Margaret had either shielded her from or used to maintain her position of power. The irony wasn't lost on Victoria. She had fired her sister to save the company, only to discover that Margaret had been the only thing preventing its immediate collapse. The laughter that occasionally escaped her lips during particularly dark moments wasn't born of amusement but of sheer disbelief at how thoroughly she had underestimated her opponent. Margaret had played the ultimate long game, building a kingdom of influence and dependency that Victoria was only now beginning to comprehend. And as the company's foundations continued to crumble beneath her feet, Victoria couldn't help but wonder if her sister's vengeance would prove more devastating than any boardroom coup ever could. Victoria's daily routine transformed into a relentless battle against invisible enemies. Each morning began with a mountain of urgent emails requiring immediate attention, vendors demanding payment guarantees, clients requesting status updates on projects that had suddenly stalled, and employees confused about new directives. Her assistant, Sarah, became a lifeline, fielding calls and managing crises while Victoria struggled to keep up with the avalanche of problems. The office atmosphere grew tense as departments began operating in silos, each team fighting to protect their turf while blaming others for mounting failures. During weekly staff meetings, Victoria faced increasingly hostile questions from department heads who had once been supportive colleagues. The marketing director openly challenged her strategy for maintaining client relationships, while the finance team questioned every cost-cutting measure she proposed. Old alliances fractured as managers aligned themselves with former Margaret loyalists, creating factions within the organization. Attempts to implement new systems and processes met with passive resistance. Employees would agree during meetings but fail to follow through, leaving crucial initiatives half-completed. The media scrutiny intensified, with reporters camped outside the office building and business journalists speculating about imminent bankruptcy. Victoria found herself giving interviews at all hours, trying to project confidence while addressing growing concerns about the company's stability. Each public statement required careful wording to avoid triggering additional panic among clients and investors. Social media became a constant stream of rumors and criticism, forcing her to establish a crisis management team just to monitor and respond to misinformation. Her personal life suffered as she dedicated every waking moment to salvaging the company. Friends stopped inviting her to events, assuming she was too busy to attend. Romantic relationships became impossible to maintain amidst the chaos. Even her health began to deteriorate, migraines became frequent companions, and the stress manifested in persistent insomnia. The mirror reflected a person she barely recognized, with dark circles under her eyes and a perpetual furrow of worry between her brows. The board of directors grew increasingly impatient, calling emergency meetings to demand progress reports and accountability measures. Older family members who had initially supported her appointment began pressuring her to reconsider Margaret's termination. Some suggested bringing in external consultants, while others advocated for hiring Margaret back under different terms. Each suggestion felt like another nail in the coffin of her authority, yet Victoria knew she couldn't afford to appear weak or indecisive. Professional relationships outside the company became strained as well. Industry peers who had once welcomed her to networking events now avoided eye contact at conferences. Potential business partners expressed concern about the company's stability, leading to cancelled meetings and lost opportunities. Even her mentor, a respected figure in the business community, seemed reluctant to offer advice beyond vague encouragement to stay strong. The financial pressure mounted as credit lines dried up and banks demanded additional collateral for existing loans. Accounts payable stretched longer and longer, straining relationships with suppliers who had once been reliable partners. Cash flow problems forced difficult decisions about which bills to pay first, leading to awkward conversations with vendors who had supported the company for decades. Each compromise felt like another piece of her dignity slipping away. Through it all, Victoria maintained a facade of control, attending every meeting, answering every call, and responding to every crisis with calculated precision. But behind closed doors, she wrestled with self-doubt and fear. Late at night, alone in her office, she would stare at the city lights and wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, heavier with each passing day, as she fought to keep the company afloat against forces she hadn't fully understood when she made the fateful decision to remove her sister from power. Despite the mounting challenges, Victoria's resolve hardened with each obstacle she faced. Early mornings found her poring over financial statements, searching for patterns and opportunities that others might miss. She implemented strict controls on expenditures, cutting unnecessary costs while investing strategically in areas that showed potential for growth. The company's IT infrastructure, long neglected under Margaret's tenure, became a priority as Victoria recognized the importance of modernizing their systems to compete in an increasingly digital marketplace. She began reaching out to former colleagues and classmates from business school, rebuilding her professional network from scratch. These connections proved invaluable, providing fresh perspectives and introducing her to potential partners who weren't tainted by past associations with Margaret's inner circle. Through these new relationships, Victoria secured tentative agreements with innovative startups looking to partner with established companies willing to embrace change. She negotiated creative solutions to immediate cash flow problems, including barter agreements and revenue-sharing models that allowed the company to continue operations while restructuring its financial foundation. To address the internal divisions, Victoria initiated a comprehensive organizational review, personally meeting with every department head and key employee. These sessions, often extending late into the evening, helped her understand the underlying issues affecting morale and productivity. She implemented a transparent communication strategy, holding regular town hall meetings where employees could ask questions and express concerns directly. The honesty and vulnerability she displayed during these sessions gradually won over skeptical staff members, who began seeing her not just as the CEO who had fired Margaret, but as a leader genuinely committed to the company's future. Her approach to client relationships evolved dramatically. Rather than relying on Margaret's old methods of charm and personal connections, Victoria focused on delivering measurable value and exceptional service. She introduced performance metrics for account management teams and established clear protocols for handling client inquiries and complaints. When major clients threatened to leave, she personally visited their offices, presenting detailed plans for improved service and innovation. These efforts paid off as some key accounts renewed their contracts, encouraged by her proactive approach and willingness to adapt to their changing needs. Financial institutions, initially resistant to extending further credit, began responding positively to her transparent reporting and strategic planning. Victoria's meticulous documentation of the company's transformation process, combined with realistic projections and concrete improvement metrics, convinced several banks to maintain their lines of credit. She successfully negotiated refinancing terms that gave the company breathing room to implement necessary changes without succumbing to immediate financial pressure. Perhaps most significantly, Victoria launched an internal innovation initiative, encouraging employees at all levels to propose ideas for improving processes and developing new products. This grassroots approach yielded surprising results. Frontline workers suggested efficiency improvements that saved the company significant operational costs, while research and development teams generated product concepts that attracted interest from new market segments. The initiative fostered a sense of ownership and purpose among employees, helping to counteract the toxic atmosphere that had developed after Margaret's departure. These strategic moves began showing results in small but meaningful ways. Monthly financial reports showed gradual improvements in key metrics, and employee surveys indicated rising morale despite ongoing challenges. While the road ahead remained difficult, Victoria found herself drawing strength from each small victory. The company was far from stable, but it was moving in the right direction, away from dependence on personal relationships and toward sustainable merit-based success. The laughter that occasionally escaped her lips now carried a different tone, one of bitter satisfaction tinged with hope as she watched her calculated risks begin to pay off. As the months passed, Victoria noticed subtle but significant changes in the company's culture. Employees who had initially resisted her leadership began approaching her with innovative ideas and genuine enthusiasm. Department heads who had once questioned her decisions now actively contributed to strategic discussions, their skepticism transformed into cautious optimism. The town hall meetings evolved from defensive Q&A sessions into collaborative brainstorming forums where staff members freely shared concerns and proposed solutions. This cultural shift created fertile ground for implementing deeper reforms, allowing Victoria to push forward with initiatives that would have been impossible mere months before. Margaret's absence continued to cast a long shadow over certain aspects of the business, particularly in client relationships and industry partnerships. However, Victoria discovered that many of these connections were shallower than they appeared, built on superficial charm rather than substantive value. As she methodically rebuilt these relationships on firmer foundations of performance and reliability, she found that many clients preferred the new approach. Key accounts that had seemed lost forever began returning, drawn by the company's demonstrated commitment to quality and innovation. The few remaining holdouts, clinging to memories of Margaret's influence, served as painful but necessary lessons about the dangers of relying too heavily on personal charisma in business. The financial picture remained challenging, but Victoria's strategic cost-cutting measures and targeted investments began bearing fruit. New revenue streams emerged from unexpected quarters. Partnerships with tech startups led to innovative product lines, while efficiency improvements in manufacturing processes reduced overhead significantly. Creditors, impressed by her transparency and determination, agreed to modified repayment schedules that provided much-needed breathing room. The company's balance sheet still showed red ink, but the bleeding had slowed considerably, and projections suggested a path toward eventual profitability. Industry perception of Prescott Enterprises underwent a remarkable transformation. Business analysts who had predicted swift failure now wrote articles about the company's resilience and innovative approach to crisis management. Competitors who had circled like vultures found themselves matched by a rejuvenated organization that responded to market changes with unprecedented agility. The media narrative shifted from one of impending doom to a story of corporate reinvention and leadership evolution. Victoria's image transformed from that of a ruthless sibling to a visionary leader navigating her company through turbulent waters. Yet beneath these positive developments lay a complex emotional landscape. Victoria found herself grappling with conflicting feelings about Margaret's role in the company's near collapse. While her sister's actions had undoubtedly created vulnerabilities that nearly destroyed the business, they had also forced Victoria to develop strengths she might never have discovered otherwise. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about the intricate dance between personal relationships and professional obligations, about the delicate balance between loyalty and accountability. These insights shaped her leadership style, making her more empathetic yet more discerning in her decision-making. The board of directors, once skeptical of her abilities, now regarded her with a mixture of respect and caution. Family members who had questioned her judgment began acknowledging her achievements, though some still harbored resentment about Margaret's dismissal. Victoria navigated these relationships with care, recognizing that healing old wounds would require time and consistent demonstration of success. She established regular check-ins with key stakeholders, using these meetings not just to report progress but to build trust through transparency and collaboration. As the company approached its one-year anniversary under Victoria's sole leadership, she found herself reflecting on the journey with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The organization had survived its darkest hour, emerging stronger and more adaptable than before. Yet the business world remained unpredictable, and new challenges inevitably loomed on the horizon. The laughter that occasionally escaped her lips carried layers of meaning now, acknowledging past mistakes, celebrating hard-won victories, and preparing for whatever trials the future might bring.